I didn't mute my mic so you can hear me shuffling around. But hold on, I'm still drinking water. Monster Hunter Supreme is not the next Monster Hunter game. It's the Supreme Court, guys. Come on. Get it together. As much as I support a woman's right to choose, King, I think it would be rather awkward to play an Ace Attorney game where you defend a woman's right to abortion. But that would be the right thing to do. Objection! Just to put my own political bias out there, we have two political parties. We have Republicans, and then we have really, really evil Republicans. That is the American political system. I know you love me even though I'm a lib? Brother. It's not like liberals are allowed to do anything in this country anyways. You're allowed to die and pay taxes. The funniest thing about people that identify as Republicans in this country is they think liberals are allowed anything. You're not allowed, you're not, you don't get anything nice. All right, here's a game for those of you who identify as Republican. What was the last big win liberals got in this country? Take your time. Take your time. Don't rush. Just take your time. I'll do you one better. The last time a Democratic president passed legislation that was good for liberals. All right, just take your time. Biden, see, that's where you're wrong. Biden is not a liberal. Try again. I want you to do a little research. Find out how this guy got appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Liberal is such a weird word. Why does it get used so much? I'm not going to make fun of Republicans all stream. Trust me, I will make fun of Democrats, aka Democrats are Republicans, and Republicans are evil Republicans. Clarence is based in what? When is the last time when has he ever actually penned an argument? It was all Biden's fault? Yeah, I know. So why does anyone think Biden is actually liberal is what I want to know. This is supposed to be drink some water time, and I'm not even doing that. I don't even know who Clarence is. You're not America boy? Well, all right. Well, you could just go on the record then and say that you think he's based, and that'll just be how I associate you politically. I know, I'm supposed to drink. I'm going to drink some more water. Hold on. I did read this really dope article a couple days ago that was at least insinuating or making the argument Izaro, that in Canada certain districts are actually legitimately being accused of things that Democrats were accused of in this country, of having health policies in place that elect to give people assisted suicide as opposed to help for their poverty or other medical issues. All right, we'll just start the stream. Here we are. Liberals get all sorts of stuff on the state level, California and New York. One can make an argument that neither conservatives or libs have gotten anything good on a national level for a long time, but have had stuff on the state level. Okay, we'll put Supreme Court aside. Most recently, the most major thing I would say Republicans got was tax reform under Donald Trump. That removed nearly all of the major tax incentives for middle-class America and majorly cut corporate tax rates. Prior to that, we had Obamacare, which people think it was healthcare to everyone, and to a very small extent it was, but it was really just a way to juice the health insurance companies. Prior to that, George W. Bush got a war to fund the military-industrial complex. Bill Clinton strengthened NAFTA, built up NATO, repealed Glass-Steagall. I mean, Bill Clinton is actually probably one of the most Republican presidents we've ever had. When you really break it down, he didn't really pass any liberal policies whatsoever, and yet for some reason, because he was a Democrat, Republicans thought they had to go after him. But he really did everything in his power to do policies that would make most Republicans nowadays jubilant. You had Reagan, of course, who started the founding of NAFTA. The only thing Jimmy Carter did was he thought about giving Americans health care. And he didn't. Who's before Carter? Is it Johnson? Lyndon B. Johnson? The whole Vietnam mess. Hey, Kennedy got his civil rights. That was nice. Kennedy is probably the, Kennedy and, was it LBJ, together got us civil rights. That was okay. What was the leak about? Okay, so here is the big news. And if you are not based in the United States, or you don't feel acutely tuned in to politics in the United States, we have the Supreme Court The Supreme Court does not make laws. The Supreme Court does judgments on laws that are then passed. So what has to happen is you have to file a lawsuit, and it needs to either succeed or whatever, get denied. It has to get appealed, and it gets appealed up to like the local courts, and then the state courts, and then the federal courts, and then finally it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court is the one that will say, well, we've evaluated this lawsuit, and based on the laws that have been created, we will agree whether or not this is constitutional or unconstitutional. Now, you might say, well, how do you know whether something's constitutional or not? And it actually is a pretty big debate. So you have certain traditionally more Republican justices that are like strict constitutionalists, where they say if it is not word for word in the Constitution, it is not constitutional. And then you have other people that look at the Constitution, generally more democratic, and they view the Constitution as more of like a living framework. So there's no way the founding fathers could have ever imagined a world where there'd be nuclear weapons, mass transit, airplanes. I mean, anything you can imagine. There's no way that they imagined all that. So the Supreme Court, depending on their own personal beliefs, their own Republican or Democratic leaning or whatever, personal opinions, will take laws that have been passed by the legislature or lawsuits that are brought up and decide, is it constitutional or is it not constitutional? Now, it is difficult to change the Constitution. It's a lot of work to get an amendment passed. I don't know the exact number. I think it's probably like either 2/3 or 3/4 of either like the Senate or the Congress have to agree to amend it, which nowadays would probably literally be impossible. But at the same time, I don't know that there's many people in power that would even want to change it in the first place. No, the Constitution has changed. I mean, the Constitution was written, and then literally the Bill of Rights was created, and then those amendments were added, right? So the funny thing is, like, you hear a lot of arguments about, like, the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was actually technically not in the original Constitution. It was an amendment, right? So the Constitution was written, and people that wrote it were like, this is all, like, the rights are implicit. Somebody's like, well, don't let them be implicit. Really write them out. And so that's what the Bill of Rights was, and then it was added on to the Constitution. And as time has gone on, more things have been added on. I think the term limits for the president was added in. Obviously, getting rid of slavery was a very important amendment. Things like that were added to the Constitution, and those are things that are added on that basically become the law of the land. So what happened, and what's the big news of the day, is in 1971, there was a lawsuit that was brought to the Supreme Court, and it's a really interesting case, because a lot of times when you're arguing something in court, you have to have like an ongoing problem. So in the case of Roe v. Wade, it was Norman McCorvey, is not a real name. It was a made-up name, Jane Roe. She had a baby and she wanted to get an abortion, and she couldn't get an abortion where she lived. So you kind of had to like rush this person through the court system as quickly as possible to get them up to see the Supreme Court while they still like had a baby, as far as I know. In any case, the Supreme Court decided to hear it. So first of all, they have to decide to hear the case. They don't have to decide every case. They could deny the appeal, and they don't even have to see it. But for whatever reason, 1971, they decided to hear the case of Roe v. Wade, based on a woman's right to receive an abortion, and they ended up ruling in favor that a woman has the right to have an abortion in the United States. And so back then, it was kind of like the way it is now. Certain states you could get one relatively easily and safely. On the other hand, other states said, no, you absolutely cannot do it. It's illegal. You might be able to go to jail, fined, things like that. And so when it was happening, when it was passed, actually up until that point, if you followed people's general attitude and impression about, you know, abortion rights and things like the United States, Apple, you're not enjoying the stream? Let me know. They would either, I got distracted now. Hold on. Well, this is very distracting. All right, there we go. They would decide whether or not it was okay. So Republicans found that they were losing a lot of ground in terms of not being popular. People didn't like a lot of Republican politicians. They didn't like Republican policies. And so they were desperately looking for another political group in order to kind of like create some sort of a lobby to give themselves more voting power. And so they were looking all over the place. They found in the American South a group of evangelical Christians. These are Christians that are like really active, you know, really, I mean, use the word fundamentalist, whatever. I mean, they're very extreme in the religion. They don't necessarily directly follow the Bible, but they have a very clear idea of what, in their mind, it means to be a Christian. And if you don't do exactly that, then you're not Christian. You have to do exactly what they say there. They've been associated with racism. I don't know that that's true. Certainly not 100% of the time. There might be some people down there, but it's really more of like, you have to be this born-again Christian person living this born-again Christian life, or you'll probably go to hell. So, you know, they kept trying to run with this group like, hey, is there anything we can get along with you on? Do this, do this, do this. And eventually they found that the one thing that they could really agree with them on is on abortion rights, in that they wanted to get rid of abortions. And the Republicans are like, all right, great. We'll just rally against abortions as long as you help us cut corporate tax rates. And so since then, it's been like an ongoing political football of using Roe v. Wade and getting people really amped up and angry that abortions exist. And that's more or less been the case progressively since 1971, to where we get today, which is, you know, let's say a week ago, certain states have made it extremely difficult to get an abortion. Like, you'd have like one clinic in the entire state that offered them for like 1 hour a day. And so they were technically following Roe v. Wade because an abortion was available for like 1 hour in one clinic somewhere. And then that was it. So de facto, we were already getting very close to the point where in certain states, you wouldn't be allowed to get a legal abortion. Just wasn't acceptable, wasn't allowed. And so what we got yesterday was a leak from Politico. So this is not law yet. This is not decided yet. What this is a leak of the first draft of a decision that was written by Justice Alito. So the way it normally works is you get one Supreme Court justice that will write the majority opinion. So in this case, Justice Alito has written the majority opinion. Don't know if it's relevant or not. Pretty sure Justice Alito is Catholic. I'm not even sure necessarily that most Catholics, if you're asked them on a day-to-day basis, even really care so much about abortion or not. Now, the official Catholic line, as it were, if there are political parties, they don't support abortions, they don't support really any birth control, don't support gay marriage, don't support really anything that doesn't involve two Catholic people getting married and then having lots of babies. But the reality is if you're to ask most Catholics nowadays, they probably don't care really too much if somebody wants to get an abortion or use birth control or get married. The Catholic Church isn't going to marry you, but there's plenty of other churches that would. And at the end of the day, if it's not in the Catholic Church, I don't think they really even care. So this is a draft that was written by Justice Alito. And it got leaked by a reporter from Politico. And it's really big news. It's really big news because what it's saying is, for a while, we've had a Republican appointed majority of Supreme Court justices, What it's showing is that we're finally starting to see that shift of them start creating and ruling on law. Casting Couch, thank you for the 3 months. And I didn't read it word for word. I did go through it very quickly last night. Agree, many Catholics like Biden are not lining in with the church teaching at all. I mean, you know, Biden is like, I think since Kennedy, our first Catholic president. And obviously, you know, his public stance on abortion is different than the official stance. And so he's got to be careful. Can I deliver my impression of what it entails before I go into the details? So basically, what the court is saying is because what you have are, you know, strict constitutionalists, you have an interpretation of the Constitution where there is no explicit allowal of abortion in the Constitution. And then there's like another word that is used, which is, I think it's a phrase. It's called rooted in history. So you've got Justice Alito talking about how abortions are not like rooted in history from like 1700s, when I'm pretty sure they probably had weird little crap they ground up in a mortar and pestle that you drink and probably, you know, force a miscarriage if you were within your first 1 or 2 months. I don't know that, but that seems like the sort of thing that probably did happen for thousands of years. So in any case, he says it's not in the Constitution. It is not, you know, rooted in history. We're not outlawing abortion. However, because certain states have already made certain stances and certain claims, we want this to be a state rights issue. So, you know, you can go all the way back about arguments over state rights. And the last big argument that I could remember about state rights was like over slavery. So that's not a good look. It's not a good look when you're like, this needs to be a states' rights issue. And like, as far as me, like a lay political person can think of, the last time it was used like, we need states' rights, was people's rights to own slaves. There may be something else that I'm missing, and I'm sorry if I'm missing it. I'm a politically well-read, but I'm not like, you know, like a major, like academic on it, like I'm a professor of political science. So that's like, that's the beginning. I guess the real question, abortion is in the Old Testament, it's a test of faithfulness. I'm assuming that in the Old Testament, they're like, if you were really faithful, you wouldn't get an abortion. However, also in the Old Testament was God being like, yo, kill your son. And the guy's like, all right. We're talking about like 33rd term abortion. So, I mean, and that's just the thing, Ryan Franco. And so, you know, we're going to get into the details of this because like I'm curious to go over the real legalese and the debate over it, you know, page by page. I don't know if we're going to go through all 98 pages, but we're certainly going to go through a number of it. If you already live in a state that is providing funding and access to women's health issues, it's not going to change, really. What it is going to do is in states that are either on the line or expressly against abortion, they're going to ban it. Did the Bible have human sacrifice? Yeah, I mean, literally, like, you know, there are stories in there of God being like, murder your child for me. As a test, though. He was just joking. He didn't really want you to murder his child. Drink poison if you've been faithful and you won't lose the child? I don't know that line, but that sounds pretty insane. Or drink the poison and then, yeah, if you're unfaithful. And so, like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to get into this first. Like, what are the reasons for abortion? I mean, if you're in a state that isn't going to allow it, you know, you've got cases of rape, incest, you know, almost guaranteed stillbirth. It could be a, you know, possible threat to the woman's health itself, you know. So that's what this is about, Cronus, is will you at the state level or federal level be allowed to have an abortion? And what this case is saying is no. No, you will not. You are not guaranteed on a federal level to be seen, and it is very possible that the state itself will not allow it. Yeah, so again, we have to remember what this case is doing isn't necessarily, it hasn't added a constitutional amendment. It's simply the Supreme Court interpreting a modern case through their own framework. They should oppose Roe v. Wade even if they support the abortion. It's anti-constitutional. I mean, the legislator can pass a law, and the Supreme Court can and did interpret it, and it's literally constitutional. You know, literally Roe v. Wade, when it was passed, by default makes it constitutional. That's just what that means. Like, you can't say it was unconstitutional. Now, it is saying, technically, based on, you know, modern Supreme Court justices, that Roe v. Wade wasn't constitutional and that it needs to be a state's issue. And again, that way of thinking is, again, just a strict interpretation of the Constitution. So I can't. I mean, it's a lot to go through, guys. But this was written, by the way, in February. So this has been something that's been kicking around for 2-3 months. Doesn't have a specific date on there. Probably a good thing for the person that leaked it. It's really interesting. Like, you could even go into the theory as to how and why it was leaked. Wasn't Alito the same one that wrote the opinion for Bush v. Gore? I don't remember. Not that it would have mattered that much. Did they have this in Google Docs waiting for a full, final go-ahead? I get the sense these are written up on a typewriter. Like, this looks like this was written on a typewriter and then copied and then scanned and then uploaded to a PDF. It's like everything's like a little bit off center. Presumably they don't put too much out there electronically, because they don't want things to get leaked in some way. But I really don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, I mean, the SCOTUS, you know, we could look in the hindsight at all of the things that the Supreme Court has done and made mistakes. You know, the question basically comes down to, you know, is the Constitution like an immutable document? Did it anticipate all modern, you know, civil and whatever, medical and legal issues that we could have had in the modern world? And if it doesn't, is there a way to interpret it in a way so that it does protect people? And for the most part, again, before it became a political football, the majority of Americans were in support of women having reproductive health freedom. So the interesting thing about Justice Alito here is he literally opens up, and again, he is Catholic. Abortion presents a profound moral issue in which Americans hold sharply conflicting views. So, like, it's so interesting in the sense, like, right off the bat, he's not even opening up of, like, constitutionality. He's opening up this is a moral issue. So he's not even saying this is a constitutional issue. He's saying this is a moral issue. And he goes into is life at conception, do all abortions end life? You know, so if you're just a fertilized zygote, are you a human being? If you were to get rid of that fertilized zygote, is that a human dying? You know, on the other hand, can women be allowed to, 90% of this document is margins? Dude, they had a 98-page limit that their professor set. So they only had 20 pages single spaced, so they did everything they could. I mean, he basically gets it, right? So you have some people on some extreme say no abortion's allowed. Some people on some extreme say any regulation of abortion's not allowed. And then a third group, which is probably the general majority, think abortion should be allowed under some circumstances. I mean, like, I don't know. Should late third term abortions be allowed? Ugh. I don't know. I guess I'm more in the middle one, but I understand that if people wanted to limit it after whatever, 16 month or 20 month, like at a certain point. He's pointing out that Americans should treat it as a sharply dividing moral issue, but is it a moral issue or is it a constitutional issue? 20-month abortion? The early 7th month abortion? I don't even know. He's making the claim that the most extreme of women's health rights people would allow for like late third term abortions, which I don't know that that's really true. So his first legal argument is that it was a states' rights issue, which is, how he basically is going to end this whole discussion. Have we talked about that? Nothing Biden says matters, to be honest with you. Like, Biden can talk all day long, but he really can't make an executive order that's going to go against a Supreme Court decision. The only thing that could roll this back is if another law was passed. So they might say it's a states' rights issue. The Congress and Senate would have to get together and pass a law that says, no, actually, we've created a law that says it is okay. So they may not say it's constitutional, that it has to be states' rights. We're going to pass another law. And then that law would have to get challenged again by the Supreme Court. What does you as president do then? Originally, he didn't do much under the framework of the Constitution. He's the commander-in-chief. He has the right to veto laws. He could create, with some help, legislation that still has to get passed outside of him. He has executive orders, but the attempt to govern through executive orders hasn't really been tested over the stand of time. So. Nobody's performing abortions after birth. What is wrong with you? What are you guys talking about? There's no post-birth abortion bill. So even though the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, the court held that it confers a broad right to obtain one. That was in Roe v. Wade, right? So you can, and again, I haven't in depth gone through Roe v. Wade. I'm obviously, familiar with it, but they made a argument that, abortion was allowed based on, the general rights that you would expect to be afforded to people, right? Freedom to live. They say the 14th Amendment, right to privacy, I guess essentially means that you're allowed to have a private medical procedure between you and a doctor. That seems like kind of, is it the due process clause? Roe is a short read. It's not standing law, though. Planned Parenthood versus Casey is. That's the same thing. What are you talking about? That was... What? Planned Parenthood versus Casey? Oh, I see. You're saying because Planned Parenthood versus Casey updated it, it became more specific? I think this abortion topic is very heavy. We don't even see from a husband-boyfriend perspective. I mean, that's something that I haven't normally really even thought about. Whereas, from a male perspective, whether or not, you know, their girlfriend or wife or whatever wants to have an abortion. I mean, ultimately, they're the ones that are having the child. So what are you going to do? It's not your uterus. Well, I know. So they go into, in this decision by Alito, Larry Boy, they go very much in depth about how Roe v. Wade and I guess Planned Parenthood versus Casey read more as a medical test more so than a constitutional test. Yeah, I mean, look, obviously if you were a guy in a relationship and you somehow ended up getting your partner pregnant and you wanted to have that child and the partner didn't, like, yeah, that would suck. But I think ultimately, you know, the stress and burden that a woman has to bear for 9 months than having the baby, I mean, if they don't want to have it, I mean, that's their choice. You know? I mean, look, women only get a very limited amount of eggs in their body. You know, Larry King was shooting live rounds until he was like 90. So, you know, the concern about whether or not a man will ever ultimately have a child or not isn't quite as extreme. I mean, I know none of you want to think of naked Larry King's, like, mole-covered, wrinkly body making, like, a turtle face going, "Argh!" But guys can have kids for a very long time. All right? Shep, stop. Larry King didn't. Larry kept going till the day he died. All right, so it gets into the medical testing of it, of where the trimester works. You know, I guess it was going to be the end of the second trimester. You know, when would the baby, if you were to magically teleport the baby out of the woman's body without them giving birth, would the baby be able to live? And so the decision was made, if the baby were able to live, which I guess it was decided at the end of the second trimester, that's where we're going to draw the line. And that seems, you know, fair to me. It's a good compromise, good middle ground. So when Roe was made, that's more than I thought. For some reason, I thought it was more grounded there. 30 states had prohibited abortion. So Roe v. Wade happened. Over half the country was then required to go in and set up funding, or at least change its laws to allow people to get abortions in the state. So that's actually really interesting. Again, public attitudes up until Roe v. Wade were generally changing over time. General public perception of abortions and women's health issues were actually getting better as time went on. The interesting thing about Roe v. Wade is it really did galvanize it, because states were now being said, you're obligated to do this, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but it is a real thing. And then Republicans used it as a political football going forward, again, to galvanize people politically and get people there. Hirschman, thank you. 29 months of Prime. Thank you for Jeff Bezos' money. Streamer, this is your first time joining your chat. Be gentle. I don't see a little exclamation point next to your name, but that's okay, Axon. You'll be safe here. All right, and so then here's the Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which actually had 3 decisions. So you've got your majority opinion, you've got the dissenting opinion, and then sometimes you get like an alternative brief, which is neither. In the middle, what is this? Big news. Big news. Supreme Court just moved abortions to be a states' rights issue. Yeah, I mean, look, nobody's saying that late second-term abortions are a reason to celebrate. Like, that's the interesting thing. Is like the people that are opposed to abortion or opposed to like women's right to choose seem to think that like after every abortion, like there's like this party going on and people are dancing and laughing and saying, "Get bent, dead baby." I'm glad I had you just so I could abort you. Like, it's not like, it's never a pleasant thing. You know, it could still be harmful on a woman's body. I'm sure it could still be very harmful mentally for everybody involved. I'm sure it takes a large amount of emotional strain on everyone. You know, if you're talking about these late second-term abortions, I can't imagine any of them are really, oh, I changed my mind. You know, the majority of them are likely, oh, there's some major congenital defect. My own life is in danger. If I have this child, they're saying that like I might die. There might be a situation where the baby is growing, you know, into like the fallopian tube or something. Just say murder will be as around, but we legislate protect victims, not perpetrators. I mean, one could make the argument that the gun lobby is so strong in this country that the reason they want to ban abortions is so that they can get killed through gun violence instead. Ever think about that? Big thoughts. Less targets, you know what I mean? It's like stocking the pond to fish in. Don't you kill that child? I want to. It's my right to kill your baby, not yours. Huh? How about that, assholes? All right, so Judgment Casey did a fair amount of overruling. All right, so he's saying that because Casey expanded the rights there, and Roe was overruled in part. So it's going to get really into like the legalese of the differences between the two. So Roe was on a trimester scheme up to, why can't women use the castle doctrine to have abortions? So have a home birth and be like, get off my land now! Like aiming a shotgun down between their legs. Make one more move and I'll shoot! We've got a right to bear arms in this country. That's been defended many times. So, the new rule is whether states were forbidden to adopt any regulation that imposed an undue burden on a woman's right to have an abortion. Now, that in some way did expand abortion rights, in that rather than it being, I guess, a strict 2-trimester ruling, meant that you just can't make an undue burden. However, my understanding is that that decision actually ended up making it even worse for women, because then they're like, well, it's not an undue burden to drive 3 miles to get a 2-hour window surrounded by anti-abortion activists to say you're not allowed to have a baby. Is my understanding. And I would say it's saying here that Casey did not achieve that goal. And the reality is if you looked at like abortion rights and say 2021, it is absolutely the case that the most recent legal ruling didn't really make abortion rights universal in this country anyways. I mean, he's actually right there. I mean, that is true. There's a large number of states that, you know, even counter to what the Supreme Court said, made it difficult, if not completely impossible, to get an abortion in that state. That is true. Again, kind of repeating himself here. Americans, Unborn are not invaders. They're not strangers. They're literally a mini version of them. What if you got a fertilized zygote implanted in your uterus and then said you have to give birth to that? Nobody says that it isn't a tragedy whenever somebody has an abortion. And it is. It is a tragedy. And, you know, in a perfect world, would every woman be able to safely and happily and without permanent bodily damage give birth to a child and give it up to adoption? Sure. Why not? What leaked? Monster Hunter Supreme is coming out, actually. I've got all of the details, and we're discussing the details right now. So it would appear that in Monster Hunter Supreme, you can use a wire bug to rip the fetus out of a woman's body into the late 3rd trimester. Wow! Capcom killing it again! Clutch Claw is back, baby, and it's never been better. How many wire bugs does that consume? It takes 2. And it's got a long recovery, so use it wisely. You might want to use Wirebug Whisperer or get a 3rd wire bug, something like that. We have to abort Xeno before it ever absorbed the bioenergy. All right, so here's the amazing part. Like, I understand that Mississippi is a state in our country, and they're allowed to exist, and they're allowed to pass laws. However, I'll go 1 for 1, okay? I'll take the hit on dropping my state's allowal to go to the Supreme Court. Okay, we will body block it. So Connecticut is no longer allowed to make Supreme Court law, but we're taking out Mississippi. All right, they both have to get removed from the conversation. Okay, we're gonna go 1 for 1 till only more reasonable states are allowed. So whatever. Mississippi has entered the arena. So, this is actually the case they're deciding. Okay, so the case is it constitutional that prohibits abortion after the 15th week of pregnancy? And again, this is how it has to work. So there needs to be an active case to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can't sit there independently on their own and say, we're banning abortion. A case has to be brought to them. You're not over dictating that guys have to get circumcised because a person with a dick, it doesn't concern or apply to you. If anything, that should be left up completely to the person that is born, whether they want to have their foreskin or not. The fact that it's a routine medical procedure and not something that's given up to a male to decide is kind of messed up. How is any of this relevant to us gamers? Well, because you'll never have a girlfriend or a wife, it's not relevant to you. The rest of us, however, it means a little bit. No, that's not true. It's about states' rights. Ultimately, this is going to go down in history over whether or not it's a regression of constitutional rights applied federally to everyone, or if things are going to be starting to be determined more and more on a state-by-state basis. And as far as we can tell, given the majority of the Supreme Court, you know, I mean, these these guys, you got like 5 people easily, you know, that are going to be, why does she just look like a little bit unhinged? She has like the same look in her eyes, like just normally posing for a photo that I have when I talk about highways. So non-Jewish people in the U.S. perform circumcision for no medical reason? Well, I mean, they might think there's a medical reason, but yeah, it's standard in the United States. that look like they're being threatened? No, Brett looks pretty good. He looks like he maybe had like a martini or two during lunch. I don't know, maybe a couple beers. Not quite sure. Alito looks okay too. I mean, so most of them are smiling. She's actually probably got the most dour picture that's there. I mean, let's be honest. The best gift most of our mothers could have given us was a early, if not at least mid, if not I'd settle for late term abortion. I mean, really, come on. We were born into hell dimension and now we just gotta deal with it. I did not consent to being born, okay? That was forced on me. Why is it standard in US? I have no idea. You know what it was? If I had to guess, there was this weird era in like, I think it was like the 1800s and early 1900s where people were working really hard to stop people from masturbating. And I think they thought that circumcision would help stop men from masturbating. They started with cornflakes. This sounds completely insane, but this is actually true. They thought cornflakes would help stop masturbation, and then when that didn't work, I think they went to circumcision. Why? Maybe they thought touching yourself wouldn't feel as good. I don't know. But there's this weird, like, so here's the thing that you have to understand to a certain degree about the United States. There's been some books written about this, and it's not like 100% true. It's not 100% accurate, but there's this concept, this idea that because like the Puritans started, you know, with one of the first major colonies in this country, and succeeded socially and economically and politically to a large degree, setting up a lot of the root bases here, that there's just been like a lot of shame around sex and sexuality in this country from the very beginning that just kind of continued forward. And it's still kind of like that, you know, at least much more so than the majority of European countries. And I would assume most African, South American, Asian countries, all of them. Larry's gone? He might come back later. He might be busy. Yeah. So there's a lot there. So if like you're not, it's not like somebody, when you're a teenager in this country, you get a boner, you cry about it. No. But there's, you know, just a lot of like subtle social cues and stuff like that that is just meant to shame people, especially women. Like there's a lot of double speaking in there. Like, oh, you got to be attractive. You got to be sexy, but don't put out. Oh, but you didn't put out. Like, there's like mind games in this country if you know, if you're a woman. So less so for men, but still a certain degree. I mean, at the very least, they get you when you're born by cutting your foreskin off. All right. So here's state of Mississippi. The law is the lawsuit is about. No, all right. So, I mean, and here's the thing, everyone. Larry Boy is 100% entitled to his opinion. If anything, I'm glad he's here, because I don't want it to be a circle jerk. You know, I don't want anyone to feel compelled to believe anything one way or another necessarily. My stance is I don't think this is a matter of states' rights, that it should be constitutional. But just because he does believe it is constitutional or anti-constitutional, whatever, that doesn't necessarily make him a bad guy. If anything, it gives you insight into what the thought process is from somebody who's on the other side, to have an understanding of where that came from, and then how you could probably get to a better outcome. Some opinions are unacceptable, though. Yeah, I mean, this is a really bad ruling. It's not the end of the world necessarily yet, because again, this is just putting it back to the state lines. The most impactful thing here is some people are thinking this is going to be a victory for Republicans, and that we believe kids have a right to be born. But the scariest thing is it's actually the beginning of rolling back people's rights. And that's the perspective that I'm seeing in a majority of the chat. Is they're not viewing this as like, oh, kids have a right to be born. They're saying this is the Supreme Court saying, actually, you do not have a constitutional right. We're removing that from you. I mean, the last time I heard about states' rights, Frater, was slavery. You know, like, that's like, I can't even imagine the last time something was states' rights. I mean, again, you could take this overall framework. You could say that guns pose a threat to our normal lives. And then a progressive court could come in and say, we're using the judgment that was made in Dobbs versus Jackson to say that we're now making guns a state right issue because it poses a clear health threat to everybody that lives in that state if people are allowed to possess guns. You know? And you could be like, well, you know, it's clearly in there. The Constitution says you're allowed guns. And they could be like, well, you're allowed a single shot, long-barreled rifle. And anything other than a single shot, long-barreled rifle is not allowed. Be like, well, that's not the same as a women's right to choose. You know, they're getting abortions. We're like, well, the only option is to have a condom. So your only option is to have a single shot, long-barreled rifle. Hold on. Nobody start getting excited about this being a Democrat versus a Republican issue. All right? Democrats 100% allowed this to happen. Or as I call them, Democrats are Republicans and Republicans are evil Republicans, okay? Let's be very clear, okay? There hasn't been a real semi-decent Democratic president since arguably JFK, or really you could go back and say it was like FDR. Really. And even then, well, FDR was like unambiguously good. But since then, there's really been a whole lot of nothing. It's really right-wing and then far right-wing, or alt-right, pretty much. Where the hell was I? All right, we're right here. How's the music mix, by the way? Too loud? You're coping if anyone since FDR has been good? I think JFK was kind of okay. I mean, civil rights was worth having. I mean, that was reasonable. Music is fine. All right, that's good. All right. So Mississippi is saying we wanted to challenge abortion because we want to move it back. We want to have a buffer window before viable and unviable. So we never want to have a possibly viable birth. I voted for JFK in person. How old would that make me? Like 60? Old? I'd have to be like 70, right? I'd have to be 18. It was like 1960 something. I did actually. Americans, the only people say America's the best and worst country at the same time? Not me. It's not me. I'm not saying that. You said that. I didn't say that. I know how much I pay for highways that don't get built. So I don't say that. You could say that. I tried to convince George Washington to be king. You know, maybe we'd be better off. This is how fascism happens. People get so pissed off. They're like, you know what? Screw your government that sucks. We're putting a king into power. I'm the leaker only anally. It's only anal leakage on this stream. And Supreme Court leakage. All right, so it was the state actually brought up the argument, probably because it was a state law that was made, that they needed to be reconsider and overrule Roe and Casey and allow each state to regulate abortion as it citizen wish, which is actually what they end up deciding. You know, I get the sense that quite possibly the Solicitor General like tossed up the softball for the Supreme Court to make the judgment that they overrule Roe versus Casey. And the Supreme Court said, all right, we'll do that. They contend no half measures are available. We must either reaffirm or overrule Roe versus Casey. This is, you know what this almost feels like? This almost feels like, to a certain degree, both the prosecution and the defense almost worked together to deliver a case directly to the Supreme Court to overrule both of them. You thought ruling... Oh, I got a cough. You thought the ruling would hand back to the legislator the legal status of abortion. Would that allow federal Congress to make a nationwide law regarding abortion? Okay, so a couple things going on here. This is not actually available. Like, this is not like their decision. This is a leaked first draft of their decision. So it's not official. There, to some degree, remains the possibility it's not even real. A possibility. We don't know that yet. All they're doing is saying whether or not decided legal framework was constitutional or not. So if this is real and they announce this decision, they are going to basically tell every state it is legal for you to decide whether or not abortion is legal or not in your state. Now, after that, could the Congress and Senate work together to pass a law that says abortion is legal? Yeah, probably. Yeah, they could do that. And then that law would then again get challenged in the courts and would have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court and get decided on again. Do we know who leaked it? Well, Politico is the one that released it. The reporter that posted it was interviewed. He obviously has his sources that he supposedly vetted. And this is not the sort of thing that, like, you get some fan fiction author to type up in their free time and release. Like, this guy's entire career is on the line if this isn't real in some way. So you could reliably believe that this is or an accurate draft, or this guy is just completing, like, employment suicide, essentially. He's aborting his career. This is not a fan fiction. I mean, unless you're into, like, alt abortion play, that's probably what most conservatives think. They probably think most liberals are, like, reading abortion fan fictions and jerking off to it. Like, yeah, have my baby and abort it. Oh, yeah. Oh! I don't know what else they're thinking, but that's my mental image of what they think we're thinking. Okay. How many clips am I farming today? I'm not. We're just going over the Supreme Court leak. Okay. Do you like that mouse movie? Does that go around? Okay. So they get right into it. Page 5. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled. So right into it, they're like, if it's one or the other, we need to overrule Roe versus Casey. And then the remaining, and we'll see how many of them we get through, 93 pages is going to go over it. And a lot of this goes down to, historical basis. And from what I remember, it gets into some very specific medical terminology that almost sounds like something from, like, the 17th century. Like, it's talking about quickening. Clinton's safe, legal, and rare doctrine is very unfashionable. I mean, again, before Roe v. Wade, 30 states were against abortion, or at least had laws that were against abortion. I mean, and again, I think this concept that abortion is popular is missing the point, in that it is like there's nobody that is using abortion as their primary form of birth control. It is really only ever generally used in cases of like rape or incest or like health threats to the mother, or possibly very early on because another form of birth control failed. So, you know, presumably you'd been using condoms or using birth control. The condom broke, or, you know, maybe, you know, the 99.9% of time that was successful didn't work with the birth control pill and you're having a kid anyways. You know, those are situations that, you know, I would assume the vast, vast majority of abortions are happening. Again, nobody's like having third-term abortions and then having the baby preserved and sold on a secondary market, or putting it up on a shelf or something like that. Like, I can't wait to collect a dozen aborted and preserved fetuses, you know, in my house. Like, people are just not doing that. It's not happening. It's the sort of thing is, you hope you never have to do it, but if you did need to do it, it's good that it's available. So there's some women in the third world that use garbage bins instead of abortion as birth control rather than abortion. I would much rather they have an abortion than have a garbage bin. That is terrifying. I use celibacy as my form of birth control. I mean, it is an option. All right. Constitution makes no reference to abortion. Okay. So again, you have to remember the way the Supreme Court works is there's two major thought processes. So there's strict interpolationalists, however you say that word. So if it's not word for word in the Constitution, it doesn't exist. It's not a right. And then you have people that believe it's like a living framework. So obviously Alito is the former. So there's no reference to abortion. So there's no right to an abortion because it's not written in the Constitution word for word. It is not there. So the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. So again, there was an amendment, the 14th Amendment, due process, citizenship rights, and equal protection of law. Basically, I think this is the law that freed the slaves, right? I'm pretty sure. I should probably know that. It's kind of the framework for civil rights in the country, really. Nullifies and makes void all state legislation and state action of every kind, which impairs the privileges and immunities of citizens, or which injures them in life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and which denies them of equal protections of law. So, really, it's, again, like, that's, you know, when you think about the history of the country, you know, this was it 1880, 1868? That's pretty old. Yeah, that's old, but it's also relatively new. It was 13, 14, and 15? Good. So, I mean, it's saying that, you know, you have rights as a person, and the state has to go and has a very deep burden to prove with which it can impose on your rights. What he's saying is, oh, the 14th Amendment says you absolutely have rights if you're a woman in this country. However, one of those rights is not an abortion, basically. And so, because it's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, any right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. So this is really like the biggest takeaway from his argument really is like, is there a history of abortion in this country? And I think this is going to really get a lot of history scholars, a lot of civil liberty scholars and stuff like that to go thousands of years back in the past and establish that abortions have been performed for probably nearly as long as there's been human existence, up to and including through the creation of the United States. Not a Monster Hunter scholar? I don't know if Justice Alito played Monster Hunter. If he did, I would play it with him and we'd have a conversation about this. I don't know if I'd be able to change his mind. The Bible has abortion instructions. Drink poison, the baby won't go away. Oh, the baby went away. Well, Is cyber hacking in the Constitution? If not, why is it illegal? I don't know. What are the motion values of the leak? Well, the motion values are not deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition, so we're not quite there yet. Until the latter part of the 20th century, such a right was entirely unknown in American law. Really? I guess as a right, yeah. Why should history and tradition be an important part to determine what people's rights? I mean, I don't believe there was any right to bear arms for the civilians, but that was added as a constitutional amendment. I don't understand why people think an outdated document like the Constitution should be strictly interpreted. They believe that because it's a way to deny people rights, because it's politically popular. That is why. I mean, that's my opinion, but my opinion is that it's done that because it's easy to deny people rights because it's politically popular. Could you argue that C-sections are considered abortions? Because the baby's delivered alive, I would say not. I don't. It's about whether or not the life has been terminated, and we're going to get there, guys. We're only at page 5. Three-quarters of the states made abortion a crime in all states of pregnancy. You know, that's interesting that 25% of the states, when the 14th Amendment was made, actually did allow abortions legally. Abortion right is critically different from any other right that this court has held to fall within the 14th Amendment protection of liberty. Roe's defenders characterize the abortion right as similar to the rights recognized in past decisions involving matters such as intimate sexual relations, contraception, and marriage. But abortion is fundamentally different. So the scary thing here, and what's gotten some people worried, is that right now they're targeting abortion, but he is discussing sexual relationships, contraception, and marriage. You know, he's making the argument that if somebody wanted to create an argument for outlawing gay marriage or gay relationships, or hell, even contraception on a state level, if it's not strictly written into the Constitution, it could be challenged. 98 pages, I'm sure one of those will be a crown. What was it? Somnicanth? That went that high? They're going to go after gay rights next, guaranteed. I mean, it's not in the Constitution, word for word. So, definitely a possibility. Laws are so complex that no one can fully understand them. I mean, all that matters is that the parties in power say that they are held up one way or the other. Roe acknowledged it destroys what this decision called fetal life and what the law now before us describes as unborn human beings. Casting Couch, thank you. Stare decisis? Hold on, I need to look that up. I don't know what that is. What the hell is stare decisis? Precedent. It stands for precedent. Stare decisis is a legal doctrine. I'm going to read it out. A legal doctrine that obligates courts to follow historical cases when making a ruling on the similar case. All right. So it just means follow the precedent. Well, they were probably following the precedent of Roe v. Wade. Does not compel unending adherence to Roe's abuse of judicial authority. Coco. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Man, how long has Alito been on the Supreme Court? Oh, actually, that might be there in that window. 2006. Has he just been sitting there fuming for like 16 years, waiting for his chance to be like, oh, I hate you, Roe v. Wade. Whoo! I mean, here's the weird thing that I'm looking for. I'm trying to find when he was appointed, he was likely questioned about Roe v. Wade. And the interesting thing is my recent knowledge, like my working knowledge, is that when most of these Supreme Court justices were appointed and questioned about Roe v. Wade, most of them said it's the law of the land. Sometimes they might have been a little cagey about it, but it's interesting that they've held this deep-seated anger. You'd wager none of these judges regularly attending any organized religion? I mean, we don't know that. Well, he wasn't around for the original Roe v. Wade, nor was he around for Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. So, the only interesting thing here is, is he going to go and talk about, what the consequences have been? He's saying that as if it's, evidently self-apparent what the damage to the country has been that abortions were made legal. Oh, learn real. It'd be impossible to pass a constitutional amendment. And far from bringing a national sentiment, the abortion issue, Roe and Casey inflamed debate and deepened division. I mean, in that regard, he is right. Can I summarize what this all is? It's a leak of a draft of a decision from the Supreme Court that is going to push abortion issues to the states. So it's going to remove the federal guarantee of abortion and women's health issues and instead say it's going to be a states' right issue. And that's it right here. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitation upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in democracy, by the citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting. That is what the Constitution and the rule of law to be done. So it actually, I guess I misspoke a little bit. What he's saying is it's not that abortion cannot be legal on a federal or state level. It's that they disagree. They believe that the Supreme Court overstepped their bounds when they said there is a right to an abortion. He's not saying that a federal law could not be passed. He's not saying that a state law could not be passed. He's just saying that the Supreme Court is not going to protect abortion anymore. It's basically what he's saying, which is not a good thing. I mean, it's not a good thing at all, but he's just saying not our problem. Supreme Court is not going to get involved whether or not we're going to allow abortion or not. I mean, everybody can get infected with brainworms today, come out 100% vote that makes abortion legal on the federal level, and that would be okay because the Congress and the Senate voted for it to happen. And according to this, that would be 100% constitutional and allowed by the Supreme Court. They're just saying that the Supreme Court is not going to let it be something that the Supreme Court upholds anymore. And that's generally how the Supreme Court works. They technically don't create laws. They interpret laws and court cases according to their interpretation of the Constitution. Except in a medical emergency or in the case of a severe fetal abnormality, a person shall not intentionally or knowingly perform or induce an abortion of an unborn human being if the probable gestational age of the unborn human being has been determined to be greater than 15 weeks. So again, the court case that was brought to the Supreme Court was one about whether or not abortion will be allowed, I guess basically after the first trimester. No, I mean, Larry Boy, like, look, I've got my opinion, obviously, but it's important because it's not taught very well in the schools. And even if you like halfway paid attention, the actual interaction between the Supreme Court, the president, and the legislative branch is not intuitive at all. It doesn't really make any sense. But it's a step back for sure for women and reproductive health. I personally believe it's a step back for Americans that even are against abortion, because if you really read into it, it's the repealing of rights. It's a weakening of the 14th Amendment. As soon as you start saying in cases where the 14th Amendment was allowed for some people and then not allowed for other people, you're really opening up a very large framework in which things that are not explicitly written in the Constitution, and even then, you're creating the ability for a Supreme Court to say, you're not protected anymore. So, that's how I'm interpreting it, You have to think about all the things, the Civil Rights Act, all those things, and even, thought process like this weak everything else in the Constitution as well. It's not just the 14th Amendment. Like I said, it could weaken the First Amendment. It could weaken the Second Amendment. It could weaken any amendment or right or any explicit protection in the Constitution, because they're saying, well, in a case before where you've been protected, you're now not protected. I mean, let's not say, again, Frater, are there horse-paced people out there chugging their horse paste right now, hooting and hollering over this decision? Yeah, there are. But, abortion is not necessarily a 100% political issue. When Republican politicians approached evangelicals down in the South, they approached them not because they were already Republican. There would be no reason to. They had traditionally voted Democrat. Right? And they used abortion as a tool to get them to become Republican, and then they would vote down abortion rights, and then that religious bloc would help them, repeal taxes and stuff like that. So in a sense, could some of the language also be used to abolish religious freedom? Anytime you're getting a constitutional ruling from the Supreme Court that is repealing previously established rights, you have to wonder whether or not that could be used in even more extreme cases. Again, that's my interpretation of it. Could they use this to say, previously, freedom of speech was allowed for all cases, but we found that, people needed to have a right to vote, but it doesn't necessarily explicitly say in the Constitution that you have the right to vote through mail, so we're going to ban writing to vote through mail. Stuff like that. You can go to anything like that, and, when you start seeing things getting repealed like that, you can go down all sorts of different cases. Could you abolish religious freedom? I don't know that necessarily religious freedom is way near being targeted yet. You could very easily get, stereotyped or receive damage in this country for having a non-popular religion. But I don't think it's ever going to be made out, illegal. But you never know. How do they define your religion? Don't worry, Biden will fix it. Somebody wake up Biden. Make sure he's got his meds. All right. So made a series of factual findings that noted that time of enactment only. Well, you guys can't see that. I might move myself. Here, I'm going to move myself down here. Over here, maybe. Hold on. I got to flip myself, too. All right, Molly. All right, we're good. Please ask Molly to chime in and give thoughts. He's mad. He's not happy. Yeah, I know, Leonard. Oh, I don't know why none of you complained about it first. But I have, look, we're only on page 6, okay? All right. All right, so we've been over this medical emergency, whether or not you're allowed to get an abortion. So we began our fact-fighting. It noted that at the time of enactment, 6 countries besides the U.S. permitted non-therapeutic or elective abortion on demand after the 20th week of gestation. Is that true? And Paleware, thank you for 30 months of Prime. You have to get class. Has been good. Appreciate your stream, Shep. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for your reasonable comments. I mean, again, like everyone's entitled to an opinion, whether or not we agree to it or not. I mean, we'll see. This is still just a draft. I mean, the interesting thing is whether or not. All right, hold on. Let me open that up. Malding? I am. Oh, a statement by Biden. I don't really care though. Do I care? Baker Hut, thank you. Interesting. Okay, hold on. Hold on, we gotta throw this up. Oh God, it's so large. We do not know whether this draft is genuine or whether it reflects the final decision of the court. All right, hold on. Can I just say, if Biden wanted to know whether it was real or not, I mean, they would tell him. With that critical caveat, I want to be clear in 3 points about the cases before the Supreme Court. First, my administration has argued strongly before the court in defense of Roe v. Wade. We said that Roe is based on a long line of precedent recognizing the 14th Amendment's concept of personal liberty against government interference with intensely personal decisions. I believe that a woman's right to choose is fundamental. Roe has been the law of the land for almost 50 years, and basic fairness and the stability of our law demands that it not be overturned. Second, shortly after the enactment of Texas Law SB 8 and other laws restricting women's reproductive rights, I directed my Gender Policy Council and White House Counsel's office to prepare options for an administrative response to the continued attack of abortion and reproductive rights. Under a variety of possible outcomes in the cases pending before the Supreme Court, we will be ready when any ruling is issued. That sounds to me like he thinks he can issue an executive order protecting abortion rights. And I just don't think, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Honestly, like, even if you could, a president's executive order should not overrule the Supreme Court, no matter how bad the Supreme Court's decision is. Third, if the country does overrule Roe, it will fall on our nation's elected officials at all levels of government to protect a woman's rights to choose. Well, that fills us with a lot of confidence. Am I right? It will fall on voters to elect pro-choice officials this November. At the federal level, we will need more pro-choice senators and a pro-choice majority in the House to adopt legislation that codifies Roe, which I will work to pass and sign into law. Good luck on that, Biden. That's all I'm going to say is good luck on that. I mean, I don't want to get too off topic, but let's just say you can elect as many Democrats as you want in office. They'll still find a way to drop the football. So, all right. Where were we? Oh, I should probably get that out of the way, huh? Go off topic? I mean, I'm trying to think what I mean, it's been almost 2 years. I mean, what legislation has Biden even passed? Something to repair bridges? The statement's not saying I'm not going to do anything, good luck everyone else. It's saying I'm going to pass an executive order and it'll feel nice for a day and then it'll be overruled. And then we're going to say elect more Democrats and then they won't get elected. And then it's going to be a states' rights issue. I mean, he couldn't even like cancel like even like a token $5,000 of debt. Where can I find episodes 8 to 24 of the podcast? If they're not on YouTube, I don't know. It should be somewhere. I mean, Manchin and cinema. So here, all right, here's my thing. A lot of people want to blame Manchin and cinema for the reason why Democrats can't get anything passed. And that thought process doesn't really do too much, because if you've got a member of your own party that's not going to follow the party line, they either may as well be an independent or a Republican. You know, if you don't have that strong of a party basis, that's your problem as a party. You know, everyone's holding up Manchin to be some sort of a boogeyman. I mean, yeah, he sucks balls for a lot of progressive legislation, but if it wasn't him, it could have just been someone else, you know? You know, I mean, you have to take the entirety of the Democratic and Republican Party for what they are, which is, again, a Republican Party and an evil Republican Party. You know, there's no saying, even if we had a clear supermajority, say we had like 70 Democratic senators and like 75% congressional Democrats and a majority Democratic Supreme Court and a Democratic president, that anything would actually happen. You know? Looks like the Supreme Court confirmed the leak is real. It looks pretty real. Supreme Court statement confirms that leaked document is authentic. Oh, hold on, I got a message from Jono. Yes. Let's look at the statement. Why would the Supreme Court confirm that? I think it's a good thing. Yesterday, a news organization published a copy of a draft opinion in a pending case. Justices circulate draft opinions eternally as a routine and essential part of courts' confidential deliberative work. Although the document described in yesterday's reports is authentic, it does not represent a decision by the court or the final position of any member on the issues in the case. I mean, they're going to see some blowback. Chief Roberts provided the following statement. To the extent this betrayal of the confidence of the court was intended to undermine the integrity of our operations, it will not succeed. We will punish women. We will not give them rights for their bodies. The work of the court will not be affected in any way. We at the court are blessed to have a workforce, permanent employees and law clerks alike, intensely loyal to the institution and dedicated to the rule of law. Court employees have an exemplary and important tradition of respecting the confidentiality of the judicial process and upholding the trust of the court. This was a singular and egregious breach of that trust that is an affront to the court and the community of public servants who work here. I've directed the marshal of the court to launch an investigation of the source of the leak. Woo! I wonder if they're going to, subpoena the guy that got it. Subpoena the reporter. I mean, in the sense that it's not a final opinion, he's right. It's not the law of the land yet. but in the sense that it's a draft opinion that's been circulating since February. And the fact that somebody leaked it now definitely means that they think it was going to pass. You know, Supreme Court justices are elected forever. Or really, I mean, they're not elected, they're appointed. The president appoints them, and then they have to get confirmed by, I think it's the Senate. I don't know if the Congress sees them too, but I know certainly they have to see the Senate. And they're not supposed to be influenced by public reactions and stuff like that, but I think somebody thinks that by leaking this, they might actually change the court's opinion. My thought process on that is, if anything, it'll probably get the court to double down on it, you know? I mean, think of it this way, you know? Think about your own personal life. If somebody tries to call you out on something that you're doing and you don't respect it, you're probably going to double down on it even more. So, like, Roberts might have been originally on the fence, but if anything, he's going to strongly affirm it. Not saying whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is an interesting thing that has happened, because I don't know that it's ever happened before. Certainly never in a case that has been important as important as this one. Smells like a midterm boost? I mean, it'll rally both sides. I guess the question is, I mean, here's the problem. It's hard to energize an electorate on, like, abortion rights, in that most people, I would say the majority of people, think that women do have the right to choose. However, it's hard to have, like, a rally, because, like, you could use nicer terms of, like, women's health issues. Like, we need to support we need to support the 14th Amendment. We need to support women's health. But ultimately, you're going to get some conservative troll that's going to be like, you're just cheering for abortions. You know, it's difficult to make it an exciting issue, you know? Is this the Roe week? Yeah. Whereas on the other side, you get the conservatives are like, we need to protect babies. We love babies. Don't let them take our babies. You know? I mean, and also that's fair as well. You know, it's hard to energize an electorate when the people you elect do nothing for years at a time. You know? I mean, we just barely got ourselves, you know, a Democratic majority after 4 years of Donald Trump. And I think a lot of the time because, you know, you saw 8 years under an Obama administration that really nothing happened. The original Roe decision was leaked? Oh, is that true? That's interesting. Am I screaming on my balcony porch? Yeah, and my windows are open too. What do you think about that? Have there been any protests yet? I don't think there's going to be. I mean, would you want to walk into the state capitol and protest nowadays? It's terrifying. Obamacare is a mess, man. Obamacare is a nightmare. Health insurance is more expensive and, like, in some ways less accessible now than ever. I mean, yeah, they made it so that your annual checkups have to be free. Great, but no treatment actually is. You know, Obamacare is a nightmare. Can you explain what a filibuster is? It's when somebody basically kills legislation by standing at a podium and talking indefinitely about something. Like, you've literally had people go up and read out of a phone book to get people not to come up and actually get a chance to vote on an issue. There might be some smattering of protests, but it's like, the population to me is just so depressed nowadays. You know, if people were barely protesting some other time, I don't think anything's going to happen now. The Democrats did threaten to get rid of the filibuster, but, you know, it's a football that can be used either way. Yeah, I mean, so the historical basis is sitting up and talking, but I guess practically speaking, they have a way to use the filibuster to stop things from passing anyways. Where are we? We're on page 7. Man, we're getting into, like, the weeds of fetuses. I don't know that I want to read about that. But I mean, that's, you know, when you're anti-abortion, you get into like, is a heart beating? Are there fingernails and toenails? Is there a diaphragm? Can they move in the womb? Fetuses have weeds? Some fetuses have been left in weeds. Ugh. What's going on? Talking about abortions. Tumors can have hair, fingernails, and toenails. Who cares? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's an interesting conversation to have. At what point does it go from being a fertilized zygote to being something that can live? And again, the old law was basically end of the second trimester. The cell division movement? Brother, I don't know. So, and that's really what it comes down to. And so they're going into the Mississippi law, and they're saying that we have to reaffirm or overrule Roe v. Wade, which they just said earlier that they're going to overrule it. At the end of the day, this is all religiously motivated. It's politically religiously motivated in that a small group of a religious section kind of cared about it. And then politically, it was used to energize and galvanize that group more to the point where it became as big as this. Abortion's dangerous to a woman? There's no question that there's not medical risks, especially the later you get into it. All right, Gator, I mean, we'll probably be playing Monster Hunter later. You know, the question is at whatever time the abortion is being had, is there a greater risk to the fetus? Obviously, it'd be gone, or to the woman, you know? You know, physically giving birth to a child is extremely dangerous. It just depends at what time it is. Monster Hunter Supreme League Edition, we've done that joke. Yeah, I mean, there was a good movie, The Cider House Rules. If you haven't watched it, it's an interesting watch about like old-timey, good old-timey abortions. Will you be doing a quest to abort Diablos babies? Diablos is not my favorite monster. All right, so is there, again, this is saying, is there a precedent for Roe v. Wade? And of course, like prior to Roe v. Wade, there wasn't. I don't know what this is supposed to be. That's blank. First, we explain the standard that our cases have been used in determining whether the 14th Amendment reference to liberty protects a particular rights. Okay, this is, all right, hold on. This right here is maybe the most important thing. Because again, obviously this is damaging to abortion and abortion rights and women's health rights. But in terms of further precedent going forward, we're going to see a framework that Alino is outlining, saying whether or not you're allowed to have a right or not, or civil liberty protected or not. Then he's going to say whether or not it was deeply rooted in history and tradition, which, I mean, we can just say this flat out. Abortion has been around since the Bible. It has been deeply rooted, whether it was made legal or not. So that is basically meaningless. And then finally, they consider whether to obtain an abortion is supported by other precedents. I mean, again, basically meaningless. The only thing that really matters is this first part here, this first analysis. So I don't know that we're going to go through second and third, but this here is really, really important to get a full determination on. All right, so he's going to be starting with his reasoning behind constitutional analysis. And you have to remember, this guy's part of that group that is a strict constitutional analysis. He says the Constitution makes no express reference to the right to obtain an abortion. Duh. And therefore, those who claim that it protects such a right must show the right is somehow implicit in the constitutional text, which was been the 14th Amendment. Roe was loose in the treatment in the constitutional text. It held that the abortion right, which is not mentioned in the Constitution, is part of the right to privacy, which is also not mentioned. What? That's weird. I mean, there is technically no constitutional right that says you have a right to privacy. Fourth Amendment? Isn't that undue search and seizure? It's technically not the right of privacy. It's not exactly the same. You know? It just says we can't search you unreasonably, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have a right to privacy. You have a right to your privates? According to the Supreme Court, you don't. Bah! So it's using several, they compiled several constitutional rights. The first, the fourth, the fifth, the ninth, and the 14th, right? So, I mean, I would say to a certain degree, the fourth and the 14th are kind of there. Is it a free speech? Why the incognito, though? I don't want Google to dox me, which it likes to do periodically. So Alito argues that American people don't have a right to privacy. I mean, to some degree, he's correct. Because there's no constitutional right that says explicitly you have a right to privacy. It has no unreasonable search and seizure, but that can be interpreted in all sorts of different ways. But it's not the same as a right to privacy. Is this abortion ban faith-based? Again, it's not necessarily a ban on abortion. It's saying we believe the Supreme Court overstepped their grounds when they said people have a right to obtain an abortion. You don't go to America, so you don't know the amendments except the ones they make memes about? Well, that's why I'm here, to help you out. All right, so court's discussion left open at least three ways in which some combinations of those provisions could protect the abortion right. One possibility was the right that the Ninth Amendment reservation of rights to the people. Another was rooted in the first, fourth, and fifth, that this right had been incorporated into the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. The third path was the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments played no role in the right was simply a component of the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment's due process, right? And that you're supposed to be given implicit civil liberties not to be infringed upon by the government in order to conduct your day-to-day life. That's basically what the 14th Amendment said. It was part of the amendments that were made to free the slaves. That said, you're allowed to be a person with freedoms in this country. He's rule lawyering his own personal belief and everyone else? Yes. Strict interpretation that can be interpreted in his favor? Yes. 14th Amendment was the provision that did the work, and that its message seemed to be that the abortion right could be found somewhere in the Constitution, that specifying its exact location was not of paramount importance. And again, that is a way to interpret, like that's using the Constitution as a framework. Casey Court did not defend this unfocused analysis and instead grounded its decision solely in the theory that the right to obtain an abortion is part of liberty protected by the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, which makes sense. So he's going to be basically dismantling the 14th Amendment. How does something like this get leaked? One of the justices or one of their clerks or one of the people that had access to it in the Supreme Court found a copy, copied it, and then sent it to a reporter at Politico, who then released it to the world. Could have been an intern, could have been somebody, who knows. Discuss this theory up below, but before doing so, we briefly address one additional constitutional provision that some of the respondents amici have now offered as yet another potential hope for the abortion rights, the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So again, like the 14th Amendment is supposed to be doing a lot of heavy lifting. Neither Roe nor Casey saw fit to invoke this theory, but they do now, squarely foreclosed by our precedents, which establish that a state's regulation of abortion is not a sex-based classification. What? Hold on. A state's regulation of abortion is not a sex-based classification. Is he making the case that men are allowed to have abortions? What? Oh, what? I'm trying to understand what the hell he's saying here. Trans men need access to abortions? I mean, yeah. I mean, what? I'm just... I gotta read this again. A state's regulation of abortion is not a sex-based classification. In that, so he's trying to say, it's not that we're stopping women from getting abortions. We're stopping everyone from getting abortions. Man, that's really weird. That's a weird thing not only to think, but to type out. I'm trying to think what the equivalent to that is. It's like there was a ban on male circumcision. It's like a law was passed saying you are not allowed to cut the foreskin off of a penis, and men to be like, whoa, I want the foreskin cut off my penis. And they said, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not saying men cannot get their foreskin cut off. We're saying nobody can get their foreskin cut off. In USA, we have trans med pregnancy? Yeah. Yeah, I guess. And they're equally denied the right to an abortion. Take that, liberals. I think he's actually subtly making the argument that because trans men exist and might still have their uterus and might have enough hormones to get pregnant, that they could get an abortion. I guess? That's really weird. That's strange. All right. Let's just move on. I could be stuck on this for hours. I mean, I guess he's saying that if you were able to put enough estrogen and progesterone in your body and get a uterus and ovaries transplanted in your body without rejecting them to get yourself pregnant and then you wanted an abortion, that is equally also not allowed. Okay. That's just so weird. Yeah, it's just, it can't be accused of targeting women because they say it doesn't. Yeah. All right. The regulation of medical procedures that only one sex can undergo does not trigger heightened constitutional scrutiny under the regulation. Is a mere pretext designed to affect an invidious? What the hell does that word mean? What the hell is invidious? What? Likely to arouse or incur resentment or anger in others. No, it's a word. You're not supposed to get mad. We're not mad at you. We're not mad at women for banning abortion because we're also banning it against men. Court said the goal of preventing abortion does not constitute invidiously discriminating animus against women. He says you're molding? No, he's saying the court is not trying to make people mold. There's a difference. He's saying if you're mauled, skill issue, mad because bad, not our problem. Laws regulating or prohibiting abortion are not subject to heightened scrutiny. Rather, they are governed by the same standard of review as other health and safety measures. With this new theory addressed, we turn to Casey's bold assertion that the abortion right is an aspect of the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Okay, and again, this is the most important part. And there's a reason they put this first, right? So whenever you're usually making an argument, like, you put your heavy hitters up front. And you got your second, you got your third, whatever less. But he knows this is the most important part. Statistics, when something exists as 0.001% of cases, you call that an outlier and don't use that to prove a null hypothesis. 0.001% of abortions have been had by people who are not women, so the law isn't sexually discriminating as errors. Phil, this is my code that I'm typing while listening to Shep talk about this. I mean, yeah. I mean, really, basically, right? I mean, that's why it was so difficult to read, because it's like, how can you even make the argument that this is not tied into women, like, intrinsically? It just doesn't make sense. But, I mean, he did it. The underlying theory in which this argument rests, that the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause provides substantive as well as procedural protection for liberty, has long been controversial? Oh. Woo! Wow. Going right for the 14th Amendment. That's pretty bold. Okay. All right. So first consists of rights guaranteed by the first 8 amendments. This court has held that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment incorporates the great majority of those rights and thus makes them equally applicable to the states. The second category, which is the one in question here, comprises a select list of fundamental rights that are not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. The 14th Amendment basically is the Constitution that says the government is not allowed to go out of its way to infringe on your freedom. Let's see if we can get to the actual text. There's a lot to read here. Why isn't it just like written out? Heavy News Day? It's huge. I mean, in some small ways, this is as big as a presidential election. What leaked? Monster Hunter Supreme. All right, so he's saying whether the right is deeply rooted in our history and tradition, and whether it's essential to our nation's scheme of ordered liberty. Can we have 7 TV as a treat? It's already here. It already exists. We have engaged in a careful analysis of the history of the right as an issue. So Justice Ginsburg concluded that the Eighth Amendment's protection against excessive fines is fundamental to our scheme of ordered liberty and deeply rooted in this tradition's history and tradition. Her opinion traced back to the Magna Carta? That's pretty old. You might have been exposed to COVID? You don't even leave your house. How did that happen? Well, I hope you don't get sick. Did you get exposed at work? Similar inquiry was undertaken in McDonald, which held 14th Amendment protects the right to keep and bear arms. The lead opinion surveyed the origins of the Second Amendment, the debates in Congress about the adoption of the 14th Amendment, state constitutions in effect when the amendment was ratified. Framers and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment counted the right to keep and bear arms among those fundamental rights necessary to keep our system of order and liberty. I like how on one hand they're going like fines, the other end they're going like I think this part was literally put in here to keep the people that are worried about their guns getting taken away, to reassure them that even though they're removing rights, they're not taking away your rights to have guns. Interesting. They still could, though. They could still do it. Luxembourg held that the Due Process Clause does not confirm a right to assisted suicide. The court surveyed more than 700 years of Anglo-American common law tradition and made clear that a fundamental right must be objectively deeply rooted in this history and tradition. So here's like the weird thing. If it's not legal, how could something become deeply rooted in history and tradition? Doesn't make any sense. Like it's like that's such like a straw man argument. You know, they could have made a law outlawing cars, and people say like, "Well, we want cars." We say, "Well, people never had cars before, so therefore you're not allowed to have them." That's the point. No new rights ever. I mean, I guess if the legislator actually passed a law legalizing abortion, and then the court never saw a case on it for 300 years, and then it was challenged, they could say, well, we've had abortion for 300 years, so it's now part of tradition. The act of owning people's property is deeply rooted in history and tradition. Yeah, I know, it's terrifying. Historical inquiries of this nature are essential when, however, we're asked to recognize a new component of liberty. So they're just saying, like, no new laws, right? And so it's funny because, like, he quotes Lincoln, "We all declare for liberty," but then he brings up an essayist that said that we don't even know what liberty means. I think I know what it means. Freedom. And so he's trying to say what you think is liberty is not really liberty. You don't know what freedom is. Only the Constitution and me reading the Constitution know what freedom is. That's why the court has been reluctant to recognize rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution. Good afternoon, Volcano Burst. Due process has been at times a treacherous field for this court. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not easy. I guess. Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. I know what that means. I want it. Remastered. So we must exercise care whenever we're asked to break new ground in this field, lest the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause be transformed into the policy preferences of the members of the court. So what they're trying to say is, we don't want to upset the people that made the 14th Amendment because we might transform that into something that they didn't want. Because the people that made the 14th Amendment would be pissed if women got abortions. Dudes are deciding about women? Well, hold on, Vensem. It's fair because they're not banning abortions for women. They're banning abortions from everyone. Men and women are banned. So it's nothing to do against women. Nope. You too, if you're a man, cannot get an abortion now either. And it's not even that you can't get an abortion. It's that the Supreme Court is not protecting abortions constitutionally. It has to become a federal or state law. On occasions where the court has ignored the appropriate limits imposed by respect for the teachings of history, it has fallen into the freewheeling judicial policymaking that characterized discredited decisions such as Lochner versus New York. I don't know what that is. Oh, I remember this one. I read about this. So basically, there was a law that said bakers couldn't work longer than 10 hours a day or 60 hours in a week. And it was challenged and upheld that you're like, nah, you shouldn't let them work more than 60 hours a week. And then it was repealed because they're like, nah, you should let people work more than 60 hours a week. It's pretty weird, man. Imagine working in that bakery like 65 hours a week or 70 hours a week. That was I guess it was an era that was very anti-worker rights. There were laws afterwards. Guided by the history and tradition that map the essential components of our nation's concept of ordered liberty, we must ask what the 14th Amendment means by the term liberty. When we engage in that inquiry in the present case, the clear answer is that the 14th Amendment does not protect the right to an abortion. What? But he hasn't even given what his interpretation of liberty is. Just that abortion is not explicitly mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. No state constitutional provision had recognized such a right, which is fair. Till a few years before Roe was handed down, no federal state court had recognized such a right, nor had any scholarly treatise of which we are aware. So there was no law before, and although law review articles are not reticent about advocating new rights, the earliest article proposing a constitutional right to abortion that has come to our attention was published only a few years before Roe. Not only was there no support for such a constitutional right until shortly before Roe, but abortion had long been a crime in every single state. So again, the Supreme Court does not really make new laws. So what they're saying is like, well, the legislature, the Congress and the Senate didn't put together an amendment saying that abortions are legal, or even pass a law saying that they're legal. At common law, abortion was criminal in at least some states of pregnancy and was regarded as unlawful and could have very serious consequences. This part is like kind of like unnecessary. So here's the interesting thing that they're actually technically setting themselves up for. In saying that there was no state constitutional amendment allowing for abortion, they might actually start getting enough states creating constitutional amendments allowing abortions that could end up outnumbering states that don't explicitly approve or deny of them. That could then get it brought back and saying actually a plurality of states are saying that it is legal. I mean, he said that it was a crime in a number of states. Abortion had been a crime in every single state. I don't know that that's true, because earlier didn't we see that 25% of states during the 14th Amendment allowed abortions? Okay. That's the document up until the point where they address the 14th Amendment, but they really don't. Like, all he says is the 14th Amendment doesn't explicitly mention abortion. None of the other parts of the Constitution explicitly say abortion. No state constitution says abortion. And we're not banning women from abortions. We're banning everyone from abortions. So the 14th Amendment doesn't protect you. All right, then. I guess that's where it stands. That's very mid. Like, not a particularly well-argued argument. But, you know, given the way some people, the way they choose to interpret the Constitution, I mean, I guess it works based on that framework. I mean, is it we hate women? Again, like, the reasoning behind this, like, a lot of the people that are doing this aren't doing it necessarily because they hate women or they hate abortion or they care about abortion at all. It's because it's politically advantageous in a lot of states to ally yourself with people that are willing to vote that do hate abortion. It's more like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of. I mean, do any of these people care? Really? I mean, maybe some of them. A little bit. But, you know, they're doing it because politically it's the right thing for them to do. I mean, and this is going to be viewed as a huge win for the conservative Republican political side of the country. It's like really a huge gunshot that's going to be heard from the Supreme Court for a very long time. Again, everybody that's here is appointed for life. Interesting, they show you when they're born, so you kind of get a sense for how long they might live. Alito seems to care. Yeah, no, he's definitely pissed. He does not like abortions. At all. So are all states banning abortion now? No. The takeaway from this is to realize that it is not a ban on abortions. It is the Supreme Court saying that they are not protected on a constitutional level. So what it means is state by state or federally, if they wanted to try and pass a federal law protecting it, you know, it's going to go to the federal government or to the states, but it's not protected by the courts anymore. Might turn into that once Republicans take Congress at the end of the year. Could they pass a federal law banning abortions? I mean, they could have always passed a federal law allowing or not allowing abortions, and they never really did. I think they're going to be happy to leave it to a states' right thing. But certainly if they wanted to, they could outlaw it. I don't know if they'd go that far, but who knows? All right, I'm going to get a little snack. I'm going to freshen up my water. I'm going to tinkle a little bit because I've been drinking and talking a lot. I'll run 1 minute of ads, and then we're gonna play Monster Hunter. Yikes! Yeah, I get a little hungry around noon now. I don't know why. So yeah, interesting stuff. We certainly live in interesting times. I'll say that much. It's crazy. I'm growing by. Thanks for contextualizing. I mean, this was nice for me too. I mean, it really helped me get a much better understanding of what they actually said and why they said it. It is scary, though. I mean, again, like I'm obviously sad for women in the right to choose, but everyone should be scared because the 14th Amendment has been put on blast. I mean, Hirschman, I mean, the thing to me that rubs me so wrong is, like, I guess abortion was mentioned in the Bible. You know? Hey, something I don't know, and one of you do. How do you get chosen as the Chief Justice? Like, John Roberts was appointed in 2005. Why is he chief? This is a protein bar. It has I think like 6 real carbs, which is almost nothing. Maybe less, 4 carbs. Wasn't chief appointed by the Supreme Court? Like, do they all vote? I guess they probably do. It's probably a lot of work. I think my takeaway here, Falling Wall, is even if you don't, no matter how you feel about abortion, well, maybe if you really hate it, but if you're on the middle of the road or in support of abortion, you really need to be afraid of the 14th Amendment. Funniest to funny, thank you. So the president appoints him? He must have been appointed by, what, George W. Bush then, huh? Was Clarence Thomas appointed by Bill Clinton? Oh, no, that was probably still George H.W. Bush, right? Can we get Kavanaugh's face off the screen? You have to get him another beer. I mean, that was insane. I don't get the 14th Amendment. Shouldn't it mean that the state can't ban abortions? Depends on how you interpret it. The argument that they made was the 14th Amendment does not apply to abortions. Man, the fact that Donald Trump got 3 Supreme Court justices is insane. That's wild. What is she, 49? She could seriously be on the Supreme Court for another 40 or 50 years. Does that help you? Here, I helped you out. Throw an eggplant on Thomas? Wasn't there like an insane hearing where allegedly he was comparing his penis to the size of a Coke can? Hirschman, thank you. Do you like the political streams that much? Grim, Haster Blaster, Suv, Crispy Lettuce, Neely, Tart, KWJW, Board, Godzilla, and Izero. Thank you, Hirschman. It's unfortunate that he didn't use like a Pepsi can, because then we could have said, take the Pepsi challenge and compare your penis to a Pepsi can. It's so terrible. It's awful. Are there actually protests? No way. I don't believe you. This country disappoints me too much. There's no way there's actually protests. Was I a teacher? I taught English in China for 1 year. I'm eloquent and debate my points well when you do these segments. Thank you. I usually just talk about my butthole. Oh, we've got ads. No. No. Maldi looks like the Secret Service agent standing behind him. No audio? I turned it way down. Why is it so quiet? Oh, hold on. Hold on.
There's more to come. The question is, what will these Republicans, these right-wing Republicans, target next? Will they have the Supreme Court overturn Griswold so they can prevent American women from contraception? They may say, we wouldn't do that because of precedent. Why would anyone believe them anymore? Will they have the Supreme Court overrun Obergefell so that they can prevent same-sex marriage? They may say, we wouldn't do that because of precedent. Why would anyone believe them? Nope.
I mean, there's no precedent for same-sex marriage outside of maybe like Hawaii did it for a while.
To a time when women, people of color, LGBTQ people are second-class citizens. I do not believe the hard right will succeed. I still firmly believe in my very bones. The story of American democracy is the story of progress. Democrats are going to fight this decision all the way for as long as it takes. We will not relent. We will not give up.
I mean, brother, you just got to pass the law.
We know history is on our side, and we're determined to preserve this precious rights.
They literally said pass the law. So pass the law.
I thank all my colleagues for being here and call on our great leader.
They actually had like decades to do that, and they never did.
Thank you. If the report we saw last night is true, that the Supreme Court plans to end the constitutional right to abortion in this country and overturn Roe v. Wade, this is a 5-alarm fire. It is exactly the kind of dangerous outcome I have been warning about and was always the goal of Republicans. They are already banning abortion.
I mean, when they passed the Affordable Health Care Act,
they are already
they could have just done that.
For a federal
they didn't.
ban right here in the Senate. And they already pushed through the far-right justices to overturn Roe and end the right to an abortion. In a matter of days or weeks, the horrifying reality is we could live in a country...
The battle of the lazy versus the degenerate?
A country where women are forced to remain pregnant no matter their personal circumstances.
It's more like two sides are being puppeteered to fight against each other so they don't eat the rich.
Or incest. A country where extreme politicians will control patients' most private decisions. And let's be clear, abortion bans will not actually end abortions. They will just make them unsafe. And they will hurt the women with the least resources and the tightest budgets. I am furious.
I would use incompetent
that
and evil.
Republicans could be this cruel. That the Supreme Court could be
Supreme
this
Court lead
heartless,
accept donations or something
that
from
in
big corporations?
legislatures across the country, extreme
The way he wrote it,
Republicans
Alito
for
hates
their
abortions,
trigger
man.
bans to go into effect. They're
Like, I think he personally
It is
hates them.
craven, and we
I don't
will
know for
stand
sure,
for it. I'm not going to
but that's
sit
the way it
quietly,
reads.
and neither should any of you.
All right, I ain't
know
gonna wash
for
my little
so many women
Cheeto
across the
hands off. I'll be
country,
right back.
This is deeply personal, and it is deeply personal to me too. I remember life before Roe. I knew people who did not have someone to turn to for a safe abortion, who were not wealthy. So even if they could find one, they might not be able to afford it. People who got unsafe procedures that left them at a very young age unable to give birth. That has stayed with me to this day, as have so many of the stories I have heard from women after Roe. I know how big of a difference it has made in the lives of so many women across the country, which is why I am furious at the idea that Republicans are going to take us backward, that this will be the first generation of women with fewer rights than their mothers. My heart goes out to everyone across the country who is feeling the weight of this news. But I'm not done fighting on this issue, far from it. And I know women across the country are not either. We will not be still, we will not be silent, and we will not back down. And to those who have not felt the weight of this moment yet, who don't think this could happen, who don't think it matters to them, it is time to wake up. Every single person in every single
There's not a single state where support for a federal ban on abortion is more than 30% support upon the public. This really might galvanize a lot of people.
It's not
honestly
happening to someone else in some other state. It is happening everywhere, and the highest court in the land is preparing to rip away your rights at this very moment. We need to fight back with everything we've got right now. We need a pro-choice majority in the Senate. We need to protect our pro-choice majority in the House. We need to send President Biden a bill that will protect every woman's right to an abortion.
I mean, she's
and
right.
We're going to keep pushing to make it happen.
But like,
because women's rights are at stake. Women's health.
They never did
is
that.
At stake. Women's
You know what I
economic
mean? Like, they had so
security
much
is at
time.
stake. Women's lives are at stake. Thank you.
How long do they normally sit in decisions, Illuminated Inc.?
Thank you very much, Senator Schumer. America woke up today to an unusual event in our democracy. The news
Oh, guys, I
that
forgot my
constitutional
controller. Hold on, I gotta go
right
grab
is
it.
about to be taken away from the American people. I'm an amateur historian, and I'm searching in history for a comparable situation where some right which we've entertained and used and counted on for 50 years is gone. That's what the Alito opinion is all about. Taking away that right to choose, that right for individual women to have reproductive freedom in this country. I read parts of this Alito decision this morning to try to absorb what his thinking was, and I was stuck on one point. He seemed to make a very strong argument that since the word abortion is not in the Constitution, abortion can't be constitutionally protected. I would say to Justice Alito and the others who are joining him, try to find the word privacy in that Constitution. You won't. It's not in there, but in Griswold versus Connecticut and other cases, we decided that was part of what being an American is all about. If they're going to be so literal in their translation, be prepared.
Alito compared
Because this
abortion to
culture
drug
war
use
is
and
gonna take us beyond
prostitution.
abortion.
He didn't
Take us to
bring up
family
drug use
planning,
and prostitution.
the
He
rights
did
of
bring
those
up.
LGBTQ,
Well, maybe he
are
did,
all
but
at stake in this
I saw
whole
him
thing.
bring up
What
guns.
the Supreme Court is pushing on the American people now. I guess it's a day of happiness for Senator McConnell and others. They've been focusing on changing the federal judiciary. Look at the lengths they went to make sure they got an extra vote on the Supreme Court. To leave the vacancy for 10 months after Anton Scalia died, to say to President Obama, no, you were not elected for a 4-year term, you get 3. And on the 4th year, we'll decide whether or not you have the power to fill an appointment on the Supreme Court and fill a vacancy. Well, you know what Senator McConnell did?
Oh,
He
Obama
held
had
out
like the
with those
worst
wish.
8 years out
Trump
of maybe
won,
any president
came back
ever,
with the justice
at least
to
in modern
serve his
history.
political needs. That is the reality of the Supreme Court today. The credibility of that institution is at stake as long as we are dealing with this kind of extremism. We have to gather together and say there's one basic saving grace. The Constitution envisioned so many things, it even envisioned this possibility. And as Senator Murray said earlier, there's an answer. The answer is in November, when the American people stand up and say this is enough of this culture war at the expense of our freedoms in America. We need to have people representing us in the House and in the Senate who will stand up for basic freedoms and not take them away from the American people.
No, definitely.
It's a chore
Definitely,
we all
if we
have
just
now,
keep
but
electing
I would just
Democrats,
say
they'll
to you
fix
this morning,
everything.
the contours of the November election this year changed. We're going to find
That's
across
totally
America
correct.
that this decision by the Alito Court is going to be a decision which is going to reverberate
Maldi, get
around
over
America
here.
in states red and blue, and the American people will have the last word.
Thank you, Dick. Senator Stabenow.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. This is a very serious moment in our country for women and for our health care, and that's why we're here today. If this leaked Supreme Court decision is accurate, it will have grave consequences.
Would
for
ranked
women
choice voting get
all
us a more
across
functional
our
government?
country.
Actually,
It would be
yeah.
the ultimate
No, I mean, ranked choice would be
intrusion
amazing.
into a woman's right to privacy.
The issue is that
The
you only have
ultimate
Democrats and
intrusion
Republicans,
into a
and
woman's right to privacy.
they are so totally okay
Imagine
with keeping
what
things the
this
status
would
quo because
mean
that's what
for a
gets them reelected.
12-year-old in Michigan who is raped. If Roe v. Wade falls, Michigan will revert back to a 1931 law that makes abortion at any stage a felony with no
All right.
exceptions
We're going back to
for
Monster Hunter.
rape or in.
But I'm glad we went over that. I learned a little bit. I checked Twitch before I went on today. I didn't really see anybody talking about it. It's kind of weird. I mean, I know Supreme Court decisions aren't as sexy as, like, presidential elections, but it's still a pretty big deal. What are the realistic odds America will get a real third party? 0. Unless something really changes, it is literally 0. Oh, Hassan was on last night? Oh, fair enough. He's quitting politics now? That's a little dramatic.